Hello friends, in this video we will be discuss about the friction and the topics clutch and the pivoted brakes. Friction, what is friction? It has been established since long that surface of bodies are never perfectly smooth. When even very smooth surface is viewed under a microscope, it's found to have roughness and irregularities which may not be detected by any ordinary touch. If block of one substance is placed over the level surface of the same or different material, a certain degree of interlocking or minutely projecting particle takes place. This does not involve any force so long as the block does not move or tends to move. But whenever block move or tends to move tangentially with respect to surface on which it rests, the interlocking property of the projection particle opposes the motion. The opposing force, which act in opposite direction of the movement of the upper block, is called force of friction or simply friction. It thus follows that very every joint in machine force of friction arises due to the relative motion between two parts, and hence some energy is wasted in overcoming the friction. Though the friction is considered un- undesirable, at it play an important role both in nature and in engineering. Walking on road, motion of locomotive on rail, transmission of power by belt, gears, etc. Friction between the wheel and the road is essential for car move forward. Type of friction. In general, the friction is of following two types: static friction and dynamic friction. Static friction, it is the friction experienced by body when at rest. Dynamic friction, it is the friction experienced by body when in motion. The dynamic friction is also called kinetic friction and is less than the static friction. It is of following three types: sliding friction, rolling friction, pivoted friction. Sliding friction, it is the friction experienced by body when slides over another body. Rolling friction, it is the friction experienced between the surface which has walls or roller interposed between them. Pivoted friction, it is the friction experienced by a body due to the motion of rotation, as in case of footsteps vary. The friction may be further is classified: friction between unlubricated surface, friction between lubricated surface. Friction between lubricated surfaces, the friction experienced between two dry and unlubricated surface in contact is known as the dry or solid friction. It is due to the surface roughness. The dry or solid friction include the sliding friction and rolling friction as discussed. Friction between the lubricant surface, when lubricants is applied between the two surfaces in contact, then the friction may be classified in following two types: boundary friction or known as greasy friction or non-viscous friction, fluid friction or film friction or known as viscous friction. Laws of static friction. Laws of static friction. Following are the laws of static friction. The force of friction always act in direction opposite to that in which the body tends to move. The magnitude of the force of friction is exactly equal to the force which tends the body to move. The magnitude of limiting friction via a constant ratio to the normal reaction between the two surfaces The force of friction is independent of area of contact between the two surfaces. The force of friction depends upon the roughness of the surfaces. Laws of kinetic or dynamic friction. Following are the laws of kinetic or dynamic friction. The force of friction always acts in direction opposite to that in which the body is moving. The magnitude of kinetic friction bear a constant ratio to normal reaction between the two surfaces, but this ratio is slightly less than that in case of limiting friction. For moderate speeds, the force of friction remains constant, but it decreases slightly with the increase of speed. Laws of solid frictions. The force of friction is directly proportional to the normal load between the surfaces. The force of friction is independent of area of contact surface for given normal load. The force of friction depends upon the material of which the contact surfaces are made. The force of friction is independent of velocity of sliding of one body relative to the other body. Laws of fluid friction. The force of friction is almost independent of load. The force of friction reduces with increase of temperature of lubricant. The force of friction is independent of the substance of bearing surface. The force of friction is different for different lubricants. These are the some. Now we discuss about the clutch. Friction clutch. What is the function and what are the types of the clutch? A friction clutch has its principle applicable in transmission of power of shaft and machine which must be started and stopped frequently. Its application is also found in case in which power is to be delivered to a machine partially or fully loaded. The force of friction is used to start the driven shaft from rest and gradually bring it up to the proper speed without excessive slipping of the friction surface. In automobile, friction clutch is used to connect the engine to the driven shaft. In operating such a clutch, care must be taken so that the friction surface engage easily and gradually bring the driven shaft up to the proper speed. The proper alignment of the bearing must be maintained and it should be located as close to the clutch as possible. It may be noted. The friction clutches of types are important. First is the disc or the plate clutch or single disc or multiple disc clutch. Second one is the cone clutch and third one is the centrifugal clutch. Single disc or plate clutch. A single disc or plate clutch consists of a clutch plate whose both sides are faced with the friction material. It is mounted on the hub which is free to move axially along the spline of the driven shaft. The pressure plate is mounted inside the clutch body which is bolted to the flywheel. Both the pressure plate and the flywheel rotate with the engine crankshaft or the driven shaft. This is the working and the derivation of the single plate clutch. In case of multi-disc clutch, a multi-disc clutch may be used when a large torque is to be transmitted. The inside discs, usually of steel, are faced to the driven shaft to permit axial motion. The outside discs are held by the bolt and are fastened to the housing which keep to the driven shaft. The multiple disc clutch are extensively used in motor car, machine tools, etc. This is the diagram of multi-plate clutch. Cone clutch. A cone clutch was extensively used in automobile, but nowadays it has been replaced completely by the disc clutch. It consists of one pair of friction surface only. In a cone clutch, the driver is capped to the driving shaft by a sunk key and has an inside conical surface or face which exactly fits into the outside conical surface of the driven. The driven member resting on the feather key in the driven shaft may be shifted along the shaft by fork lever provided at B in order to engage the clutch by bringing the two conical surfaces in contact. Due to the friction resistance setup at the contact surface, the torque is transmitted from one shaft to the another shaft. This is the diagram of cone clutch and the derivations of the cone clutch. Centrifugal clutch. The centrifugal clutch are usually incorporated into the motor pulley. It consists of number of screws on the inside of the ring or pulley as shown. The outer surface of the shoe are converted with friction material. These shoes, which can move radially in, guides are held against the spider on the driving shaft by means of spring. The spring exerts a radial inward force which is assumed constant. The mass of the shoe and revolving cause it exerts a radially outward force. The magnitude of this centrifugal force depends upon the speed at which the shoe is revolving. A little consideration will show that when the centrifugal force is less than the spring force, the shoe remains in same position when the driving shaft was stationary, but when the centrifugal force is equal to the spring force, the shoe is just floating. When the centrifugal force exceeds the spring force, the shoe moves outward and comes into contact with the driven shaft member and press against it. The force with which shoe press against the driven member as in difference of the centrifugal force and spring force. The increase of speed causes the shoe or press harder and enable more torque to transmit. This is the figure and the derivation of centrifugal clutch. Thank you very much.